Timmy Joe reviews anything.
Reviewing computer parts on YouTube.
Woo! Gotta be pumped on that, right, Will? Computer parts! Woo!
Oh, yeah.
Hi there, my name's Timmy Joe. I make videos about computers and computer parts all over this internet. How's it going today? And I got a treat for you, as always. Got a wicked cool graphics card, something out of the ordinary. And, she's a huge one. She's a beast. She's a 3-slot monster. That's right. And we're going to have a look at it today. I found this on Facebook Market Group. And actually, a friend of mine did, and he threw it my way. And I got it for $80 Canadian. So, pretty stellar deal. It's the Matrix Platinum Edition of the R9 280X, which I don't fully understand, but we're going to get into it. Huge box. Comes with some aid to get you prepped to LN2 cool this thing. It also has some funky fan stuff on the side. Press this and the fans will go full speed. It also has some buttons on here to increase some stuff. I don't know, we'll be taking it apart in just a second to have a look at it. And you want to see it compared to Vega? Jeebus. Now, there's, a pretty similar version to this. Like that's what the stock cooler would have come with, a blower model, and yeah, I don't understand why they made this edition. I guess the second tier down, the 280X. Some people would have been wanting to LN2 overclock them, but the 290 was out, and that makes more sense to me. So I don't know quite why they made this, but they made it and it's awesome. It's essentially got huge CPU cooler, 5 heat pipe cooler inside it. And we're going to take it apart and have a look at it in just a second, so that's pretty cool. And yeah, it's the 280, which is the 280X, I should say, which is based basically on the 7970, which was a very decent graphics card for AMD. And then NVIDIA started to take off from there, and it's built on the 28 nanometer process. They made the 290 after that, 290X, and bigger, basically just blew up the die. And this thing, they just moved it down a tier. And some things that this thing has, RGB. It has RGB. It has a version of their GPU boost or whatever, because the stock frequencies on this is 850 megahertz, and it boosts itself up to 1000 megahertz. And then the memory is 3 gigabytes of GDDR5, and it's goes 1500 megahertz. And I'm able to clock this as is. I haven't taken it apart yet, but the cooler's so beefy on it, it probably doesn't matter how bad the thermal paste is on it. I've been able to get it to 1175 on the GPU core clock, and 1675 without doing anything. Just I don't even need to have the fan profile lifted on it. It's actually pretty silent. Here, this is it in Firestrike. Yeah, it's just hanging out in Firestrike, running a loop at 1175, and it's barely audible, where this thing it sounds like a vacuum cleaner as soon as it's been running for 2 minutes. Anyways, let's go ahead and get her taken apart. And yeah, it is launched in October of 2013, and this is some special version of it. And it's the Tahiti XTL variant of this core, and we can tell it's never been taken apart because look, the warranty void sticker is still there. It actually supports DirectX 12, which is pretty cool. So it has 2048 shader units, 128 texture mapping units, and 32 ROPs. And this would have been, pretty high-end graphics card at the time. So it's that easy to take it apart. Okay. And here. It's, looks like a 7970s GPU, but boy howdy, that cooler looks interesting. So yeah, it has RGB on the Matrix logo at the top. I thought that was really, really neat. And let's see if I can get this out without breaking anything. That is a beefy ass cooler. I like that. Not too dirty, but yeah, thermal paste is actually it's still pretty sticky. It's still pretty sticky. So I just wanted to take it apart and have a better look at the cooler. and then we'll get into a little bit of benchmarking on it. Just see how far you can take a Tahiti core, because that's worth looking into. So let's go ahead and we'll get this thing all cleaned up, put back together, and we'll run it through its paces. I already did some preliminary testing. It only got to 74 degrees on the default auto fan profile in a Firestrike loop, overclocked to 1170 megahertz. So this thing's a pretty big beast. I wish I could put this on my Vega. Unfortunately, the Vega spacing is like way too far out to really get that done. I'd have to really do something special for that. But wouldn't that be cool, putting this cooler on Vega? I think that would be cool. So anyways, let's go ahead and clean the card up, get her back together, and then we'll do some benchmarks and see how she performs in 2019. We're all done benching this card, and it is a pretty cool card. It is very interesting how amazingly humongous it is. The fact that it's got RGB on it on the top there on that Matrix logo, and the cooling solution is just, I'll definitely have to play with it some more. Let me know if you'd like to see a Peltier cooler between that heatsink and the graphics chip in there. I'd like to try something like that. I think this is a great card to try that on, because you need a heatsink on the other side of a Peltier cooler. Just some video ideas thrown out there. So, gaming benchmarks, as we saw, I try to keep it as new as possible, as 2019 as possible, okay? Games that are still, really being played in 2019, and with the exception of Doom. I think Doom was the title I chose, that most represented how this card used to perform. You can crank the settings up and still get a really, really awesome experience at 1080p. But 2019, Shadow of the Tomb Raider and Battlefield 5, we see that you're having a hard time even at medium settings with the 3 gigs of VRAM that this thing has, and the level of performance that it offers. So we've reached a point where by 2020 this stuff's going to start being obsolete. And yes, there are 4 gig versions of cards from this era, and like a 70 or a GTX 770 or something like that. So but those versions are harder to come by, because when they launched, you just didn't need that kind of VRAM. Well, this thing in this era of card has, I think, met its match with the games from 2019. As we saw, it's hard to even keep up at medium in some of the newer titles. So just keep that in mind. Of course, esports titles, and it plays Fortnite absolutely just fine. Plays Apex Legends just fine. Games that are geared more towards the masses. But if you want like a super cinema experience, it's not going to happen with something like this. Basically as of now, which is pretty interesting. So let's talk about the overclocking one more time, and how far I was able to push this. So once I changed the thermal paste, not much changed. In fact, there was very high-end thermal paste on this card that just goes to show that manufacturers can put a decent product on something, and it's not going to be rock hard after, you know, almost 5 years of use. You know, because this card hadn't been taken apart before, and it was still like, you know, kind of moldable, the thermal paste that was in there. So kudos to that. You know, they use really cheap thermal. Like, what are you saving by using cheap thermal paste on a graphics card? Like a couple of pennies per sample. It just doesn't make sense. So not much changed, but I did play around with the settings just a little bit more, and a good 7970. I think I had a Sapphire version that was a pretty big heatsink on it. Was getting around 10,060 in the graphics score in Firestrike. Well, I broke 11,000 with this card. So comparing, you know, scores, it's not the same processor or anything like that, so that might have something to do with it. But, you know, 11,000, that's really awesome. I actually ran Firestrike at 1200 megahertz on this thing, and it didn't crash. Although, if I did try and run games at 1200 megahertz, I would run into a crash like 10 minutes into the game. So it wasn't a stable overclock, but you know, pretty awesome how far a giant ass cooler can push the silicon. You know, especially because this would be a very well binned Tahiti core. So pretty cool stuff. So I really like this card. I think it's super awesome. I'm glad I added it to my collection. The 3 slots that it takes up. And, you know, it's not exactly the most relevant card today, but it was certainly a heap of fun to play with. And it'll be awesome to do some experimenting on with some, you know, Peltier coolers or some exotic cooling or something like that with that giant heat sink on it. But I'm at Watch Timmy Joe, Instagram and Twitter. You still got a 7970 or an R9 280 or 280X? Is it enough in 2019 for the games that you play? I'd like to hear it in the comments below. Yeah, and I understand that, you know, I didn't put the glass on this or anything, just in case you're wondering. This is just my new GPU test bench with it's cool because it's got the vertical graphics card in there, but I just leave the glass off. Leave me alone. But yeah, let me know your experiences with this level of graphics card. I think a 780 or a 770 is kind of like the realm of where this is at. And with you know, 2 or 4 gigs of VRAM, what are you getting in these newer titles? I feel like we're pretty much at an end for like that era of card. The Tahiti, the you know, of course an R9 290 is going to be all right, and you know, a 780 Ti I think is going to be all right. But you know, we're pretty much leaving that era behind us, and you know, you can get away with some Maxwell or some Hawaii cores and stuff like that, but that level and before, it's all done. So I'll see you guys in another video. Thank you very much for coming along a little journey and playing with a video card with me. And yes, I talk fast and scream at the camera. Bah! I'll see you guys in another video. Have a good one.